Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Dennis Levin. I'm a retired pastor here at Wesley. I used to be at Wesley. Now I'm at Queen Street United Methodist Church. And welcome to our Wesley Bible study. Today we're going to kick off the book of Ruth and finally get out of the terrible books of Judges and all the Pentateuch stuff. We got some bad things ahead when we start getting into Samuel, but I just want you to know the book of Ruth is kind of a reprieve. I think there are a couple of reasons why the book of Ruth was placed where it was in first the Greek Bible, the Septuagint, and then later the Christian Bible put it in this order, where it's right between Judges and 1 Samuel. It's a good book for a transition, because the first thing it says is this is in the time of the Judges. So you know it's in the time of the Judges. But the story of Ruth is a precursor to the explanation of who David is. And so when you get into the book of Samuel and the idea of monarchies and things like that, so the book of Ruth, I mean, you got to skip over Saul, but it gives you an idea about David and his lineage. And in giving us David and his lineage, she's also included in Jesus' lineage. So she's an important character for us. There are some things I didn't mention. I did a cast last Sunday from home, which was kind of an introduction, but there's something I did not go over that I think is important for us to understand about the book of Ruth. And it has to do with style. You see a number of things happening in the book of Ruth. There are a lot of plays on words in the book of Ruth that you don't pick up in the English. But in the Hebrew, you have some things that are juxtaposed that, are like almost like puns in a way. Then there is a poetic area in the book of Ruth. Plus, thank you, heating system. Something else about the book of Ruth is that some of the names that are in the story, the names have meanings that are commensurate with the role that they play or don't play in the book of Ruth. So we're going to see how names are important in the book, and it's a way of enhancing the narrative. And you find this happening a lot in the Old Testament. You will find that there are stories in the Old Testament where you have some prominent characters, and it just so happens that their name fits the role that they're playing. And within that context, my suspicion is, and I think it's a good one, that the book of Ruth is actually somewhere like the book of Jonah. It's a story that has its roots in history, but it's a play. And so maybe the names have been changed to protect the innocent or something like that, but understand that the book of Ruth is being presented very much like like the book of Jonah, which is also a play. And so just because it's a play and just because there are features in it, it's just like Shakespeare. You can look at a Shakespearean play, and he pulls things from history into the play. So it's a historic play, okay? The names of the countries are real. The names of the kings might be real, but the panoply of characters that you have in are entirely made up. This happens in I think Hebrew narrative and Hebrew drama quite a bit. So what you're looking at is a play, but just like with Shakespeare, when you go to watch Shakespeare, don't get hung up on the props, okay? Pay attention to the point that Shakespeare is trying to get across, okay? And Shakespeare uses characters to get a point across. This is the same thing that's taking place in this story of Ruth. People. Sometimes we have big discussions in the Bible about whether Jonah was swallowed by a whale or a fish, or big aquatic animal that swallowed him, okay? Leave it there. Because it doesn't matter. It does not matter. If you're trying to make this thing into some kind of a truth, you know, it's like arguing over whether in Hamlet, the candlestick that you see on the table is solid gold, or if it's brass, or if it's wood painted gold. You know, you can talk about that all day long and miss Hamlet. Okay, so when you're reading biblical plays, don't get hung up on the props. I think it's important, and somebody, whoa, it's in the Bible, so it must be true. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What's a parable? Okay? So take a look at Ruth and consider it as you would like a parable. There's a point to be made, several points to be made in the book of Ruth. If you're trying to, and in fact, we don't even know when the book of Ruth was written. But we do have an idea, some idea of why the book of Ruth was written. And there are features in the book of Ruth that are very, very important for us as we make transitions from Old Testament thinking to New Testament thinking. Okay, and there are plenty of places in the Old Testament that have New Testament thinking in it. Okay, the book of Ruth gives us some insight into how these ideas are developed and how they actually stand in contrast to other ideas that you find in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a Jewish narrative. It's a Jewish production, and you can't have a Jewish production without a debate. Okay? So understand, just because there are some things in the Bible that contradict other things in the Bible, hey, it's a Jewish Bible, so, you know, get over it. All right, so let's take a look at chapter 1. Basically, the story of Ruth is about a family that migrates from Bethlehem into the area, the territory of Moab, because of a famine. And then things transpire from that, so we'll take a look. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab. Understand, if you go back to Deuteronomy, okay, in the book of Deuteronomy, there is a prohibition that a Moabite could not be assimilated into a Jewish community until the 10th generation. Okay? They don't like Moabites. Okay? So they go to what would normally be a very hostile territory. He and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, or Elimelech is really the proper way to say it, which, by the way, means God is my king, in a time of the judges when there is no king. So is there a hint there that something might be coming? Okay? And the name of his wife, Naomi. Naomi means sweet. Okay? Okay, his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. All right. Understand that there isn't much of a future for these guys. So, Mahlon comes from a root word that might be used in the plagues of Egypt. It's kind of a malady or disease. Okay, and Chilion was like death. So, just a hint. Maybe that has something to do with the characters. Okay. And they were Ephrathites. Okay, Ephrathites. Okay, Ephrathites, understand the book of Judges opens and closes with Ephrathites. Okay? But these people are from Bethlehem. Okay, sometimes Bethlehem is called Ephrathah. And its origin is from a woman who founded the town, and they suspect her name was Ephrathah. Okay? And Bethlehem means house of bread or house of food. Okay, bread and food are kind of synonymous in the Hebrew. Okay? In Judah, they went into the country of Moab and remained there, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The names of the one was Orpah, not Ophrah. Okay. And the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband in a foreign land. Okay, this is not good. So now the question is what to do. Now understand, a woman in her circumstance would believe that she had fallen out of favor with God. Every once in a while we get into circumstances where we feel like we have fallen out of favor with God. Happens to me quite a bit. But anyway, she feels like she might be cursed. Okay? Then she started to return, this is Naomi, then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, where she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. All right, remember they moved there because there was a famine in Bethlehem. Now she's hearing rumors to the effect that the famine's over. Understand that the Lord is giving them food, so which means that the Lord also gave them the famine. So if that's the case, then for some reason the people of God had fallen out of favor once again, and there was a famine in the land. Now that seems to be expiated, and we're back eating bread in Bethlehem. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house." Interesting, because usually it says go back to your father's house. Okay? "May the Lord deal with you kindly as you have dealt with the dead and with me." So, there is a very positive relationship between Naomi and her daughters-in-law. Okay? This is biblical. "The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in your own house, in the house of your husband." Okay, so what she's saying to these daughters-in-law is go back to your mother's house. Why? Because in that culture, while the father is the one who puts the imprimatur to the contract, the marriage contract between families, it's the mama that does the horse trading. Okay? So she thinks if they go back to their mother's house that mama can find them husbands again. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands?" Wow, that's a weird thing, huh? Okay, that's the Levirate marriage that's being referred to, where if a man dies and he has no offspring, his brother is supposed to marry his widow, and the first child born by the widow is considered the son or daughter of the husband who died. Okay, go back to Judah and Tamar if you want a really cool and nasty story about Levirate marriages. Okay, "Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband, even if I thought there was hope for me. Even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Well, there you go. Okay? Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Both of them were willing to go back with Naomi. Naomi makes an argument, a pretty good pitch actually, and Orpah is fairly confident that Mama's going to get her a husband, okay? It may be that Ruth is not. You don't know what kind of house Ruth came from, okay? Or what kind of deal might be struck for Ruth. So she's going to cast her lot with Naomi. And it's not just that prospects are good with Naomi. They're not. She goes back to Naomi. She's going to be a foreigner, and she'll be definitely a second class, not even a citizen, just a second class person in that culture. So she's gambling a lot. So she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods, after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave, to turn back from following you." Now this is a poem, okay? Or a song. "Do not press me to leave you, to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and will I be buried. And there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." All right, now that is quite the song. You can see how this would fit right into an opera, you know. But something is happening here, okay? Remember Elimelech. He's the Jewish father, okay? If Elimelech continued practicing his religion in the land of Moab in front of his family, and his family was faithful to Jewish practices and to the worship of God, Ruth may be comparing what are the circumstances that you find yourself in when you worship that God as opposed to the circumstances you find if you're worshiping the Moabite gods. And she may have found that there is more order, more justice, even more consideration for women in the Jewish culture than there was in the Moabite culture. Okay? So I'm just speculating, but if you have a guy whose character is God is my king, you pretty much surmise that this guy is going to be practicing Judaism no matter where he goes. Okay? Now, what is the message that we draw from that piece? The message is that even though Judaism is not a religion that is seeking converts, even though Judaism is not a religion that seeks converts, the example of Judaism in other cultures will have a drawing effect to people to come to their God and to try to understand their worship. And you see references to this sort of thing in not only the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, where you have a centurion who was a lover of God and wasn't Jewish, was not allowed really into the temple or into synagogues, but nonetheless he admired many of the features of Judaism as compared to the practice of religion in Rome. So the message, I think one of the messages is that if you are a godly people, and you live in a community that might not be so godly, your example, more than anything else, will draw people to your God. This is basically what now the history of missions and missionaries hasn't always been really good. But a missionary that goes into another country and does things for people in a Christian way is somebody who's going to draw people to Christianity. Because generally speaking, you're going to find a lot of features in those other cultures that they go to. And I've met a lot of missionaries, believe me, in my life. You're going into a culture that's got all kinds of demonic stuff going on. And people see somebody coming in with a very altruistic attitude and a forgiving nature and being gracious and giving more than they get. People will be drawn to that, to Christianity. If you want an example, contemporary, right now, guess what the fastest growing religion in Iran is right now? It's Christianity.
That doesn't surprise.
Well, it shouldn't, really. Because you take a look at they consider Islam to be an Arab invasion. When this thing all flips, things are not going to go well for Muslims in Iran. They're already burning mosques all over the place. But generally speaking, people are fed up with Islam in Iran. And they can be either Zoroastrian, which is a traditional Iranian religion, or a lot of them being drawn to Christianity because they see it as a direct opposite to the way the Islamic culture is behaving. Okay? So I think there's kind of a thing between the lines here about why Ruth might want to migrate with Naomi. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women said, "Is this Naomi? You're back after 10 years." She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi," which means sweet. Okay? Call me Mara, which means cursed. Okay? For the Almighty, see how names and everything work into this? Okay. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Now, that's not the way that you ingratiate yourself into the neighborhood. Okay? Who's going to look out for the woman who is cursed? Well, guess what? So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Oh boy.
Do you think that she was really cursed?
She considered herself to be.
Yeah.
Okay? Understand that the history of our religion is that out of great calamity comes great good. Somehow or other, God seems to take what has happened to us. We learn from it. Sometimes we learn that God is good. Sometimes we learn that we don't like it so much. But all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. And it's hard for us as we go through circumstances to fathom that. Okay? But that's why you go through those things, and that's what we call life. And it doesn't mean that the wrath of God is against you. It means that sometimes you find yourself in a situation that tests your faith. Okay? And while you may for a long time fail, there may come a point where you pass. And you understand it better. There was a song my dad used to sing as a kid, we'll understand it better by and by. And sometimes that's what it takes. We just understand it better by and by. We don't understand it right away. Okay? And sometimes we think that the hand of God is against us, and maybe not necessarily so. Maybe not necessarily so. Not to minimize what's happening. All right. Let me see where I am. I'm almost at the end. Why don't we pick up chapter 2 next week? But this is where Ruth meets Boaz. I like Boaz.
Boaz.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Boaz is one of my favorite, I don't mention very much that this is one of my favorite guys in the Bible. Boaz is one of my favorite guys in the Bible, okay? He may drink a little too much, but I like the guy nonetheless. Okay. So, do you have any comments on Ruth? How do you?
I wonder where two single women, or widowed, whatever,
Yeah.
going to a farm, where do they stay?
Family.
Oh, okay.
They will be accepted back. Okay. Elimelech was not totally destitute. We're going to find that there are resources. Okay. But family is family.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and they take them in. And one of the things that we're going to see by implication is that the relationship between Ruth and Naomi is so loving and compassionate that people notice how this daughter-in-law is taking care of her mother-in-law, even though they come from different cultures. It's very important for people to see that, and we're going to see how that develops. Whereas Elimelech may have set an example for Ruth in Moab, Ruth comes to Bethlehem and sets an example to the people there who might otherwise be very hostile to a Moabite. Okay? So anyway.
So she's feeling cursed because she's lost her husband and two sons.
Wouldn't you?
I mean, there's nothing else we read why she's.
Well, the thing is, I mean, she didn't have any means of support anymore. Okay? And now she's got two other women to support as well. So, things are getting lean. So anyway, she's headed back to the house of bread. So we'll see what happens.
Elimelech had a brother who was single. He would have been obligated to marry.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to see how some of this kind of blends in. Okay. Interesting proxy system that they've got in ancient Israel. We know that there's a good ending on this story, but sometimes you got to go through some stuff to get there. So anyway, but things are going to start looking up in chapter 2. All right. So if you have any questions or comments or snide remarks, send them my way, and we'll deal with them. But thank you for being with us, and God bless you. Have a wonderful week.
Every day, one doing it.